Wave your hands in the air like you just don't care. Okay. I love the story. of Snow White. It was short and it was to the point. It was a lot of meat in that story. Quick overview. Snow White was born a princess and born into a royal family. Her mother died when she was at a young age, and her father married another queen who became Snow White's stepmother. The stepmother looked beautiful on the outside, ladies and gentlemen, but she was rotten on the inside. She was full of jealousy, envy, and low self-esteem. She treated Snow White like she was a maid, like she was an orphan. She had Snow White scrubbing floors and cleaning windows for years. But the first thing that I loved about Snow White is that she was faithful in her duties. And she grew more beautiful by the day. Because of the queen's insecurities, she would go to the mirror daily and say to the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The man in the mirror would say to her, "You are the fairest of them all in the land." Years had gone by and the queen asked the mirror, "Who is the fairest of us all?" But this time, the man in the mirror said to the queen, "Snow White is the fairest in the land." And guess what? The queen was furious. And then the queen sought out to have Snow White killed. Now, this is what happens, people. When people watch you, they watch you grow, and then they get jealous of you. They become envious of you, and they want to start plotting so that they can water you down. The queen instructed the hunter to take Snow White into the woods and cut her heart out and bring it back to me. This is what people do to you. They use you up for what they can get out of you, and after they think that they're throwing you away, they'll say, "Well, I'm done with her. Let me move on to the next victim." Well, let me tell you all something about this. That's a good deal. That's a good deal when people throw you away, when they think they throw you away. So why is it a good deal? Because they're not getting rid of you. God is really moving them out of the way so that you can pour into the lives of other people. And when we look at it from that perspective, ladies and gentlemen, we won't feel as though we have been used. Always know that God has people in line who are waiting on you to serve them. You have to let people go so that they too can spread their wings. And you can sit back and you can smile and say, I poured into them. I impacted that life. That's what we're all here to do. So we say, we want to serve. So why do we take it personal, people? Now let me tell you what else happened in my story, Snow White. When the hunter dropped Snow White off in the woods, the hunter found favor with Snow White. The hunter found favor with Snow White to the point that he could not even attempt to harm her. The hunter saw her heart, and he told Snow White, run along in the woods. And the topic that I had was the ram in the bush. And that was one of the rams in the bush. People will find favor with you. When you think everyone else is against you, God is always going to have a ram in the bush. You have to understand that when Snow White was dropped off in a place that she had no clue as to where she was. Snow White felt lonely. She felt sad. She started crying. She was hungry. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Snow White kept on moving. She didn't stop because of the challenge that was faced in front of her. Snow White kept moving. And because she kept moving, in the moment of challenge, there was another ram in the bush, and that was that cottage. She looked up and she saw a little cottage. She went to the cottage, she turned the doorknob, and then guess what? The door was already open. And this is what happens for us sometimes. When we can keep moving, another door of opportunity is going to open right when you make it through that challenge that you've been faced with. It doesn't matter how you feel when you're faced with challenges. All we have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is keep moving. My question to you all is this: how many doors of opportunity does God open for you and you fail to go in because of distractions? Because you're sitting on the seat of do nothing, you're sitting in the pool of fear, you're sitting in the feelings of uncertainty or low self-esteem. Whatever the reason is, you just cannot seem to walk through that door. Well, Snow White went into the cottage and she went to sleep. And when the 7 dwarfs who lived in the cottage came home, they saw Snow White and how beautiful she was. And they found immediate favor with her. How about that? That's another ram in the bush. Snow White told the dwarfs what had happened to her, and they told Snow White that you could stay with us as long as you want to. The dwarfs left to go to work the next day, and while they were out, stay with me, y'all, the wicked stepmother, who was the queen, was in her palace, still scheming. She asked the man in the mirror, "Where's Snow White?" And the man in the mirror told her that Snow White was living in the cottage, in the woods, with the dwarfs. Snow White was happy. She was content. But what really amazed me in that story was that the queen was still miserable. And this is how some people do in their lives. But if we just stay focused on the vision that God has put in front of our lives, then of course, we're going to make the mark and we're going to receive those blessings that the Lord has laid out for us. The queen had already gotten rid of Snow White by sending her to the woods, and she was still miserable. This is what happens when we have a competitive mindset. And I think it was William Waddles in his book, I think it was Receiving Your Riches. He says that it's enough people to go around for all of us. And he says that there's no need to work from a competitive state because there's nothing, we can't gain anything from being competitive with other people. So, having said that, what was it? Not the queen, but it was the beautiful queen. But what she did was she dressed herself up as if she was an old lady. Like I said, she was still worrying about Snow White. She couldn't do her own work because she was worrying about somebody else. She dressed herself up, disguised herself, and she put on this old garment. She went to the cottage in the woods. She knocked on the door. She told Snow White, "Oh, I don't have any food. I'm hungry." Snow White took her in. She fed her. And when Snow White fed her, the gratitude that she displayed to Snow White, even after feeding her, she gave her a poison apple. And I'm sure you all remember that story. Snow White ate the apple, and the only way that Snow White could come out of that deep sleep was to have a kiss from a prince. So let me tell you how God works. The prince had been looking for Snow White ever since she was removed from the palace. That's another ram in the bush now. He found the cottage, and there was Snow White sleeping. So the prince kissed her, and when he kissed her, she recovered. And of course, they rode off in the sunset. So my message to you all is this through my story. It's when people are mistreating you, God already have other people looking for you so that you could serve them. And let me tell you something. Life and death is not in the hands of other people. And when I say life and death, meaning no one can destroy a person's talents nor your gifts, because the gifts didn't come from people, they come from God. And no one has the power to set you up or stop you from receiving what God has in store for you. Ladies and gentlemen, when people are trying to tear you down, over here, God is going to lift you up over there. No matter what you go through, my message to you today is just keep moving and know that God always have a ram in the bush. I encourage you today to be like Snow White. Be faithful with the gifts that God has given to you. Be like Snow White and just keep moving, even in the midst of the challenges. And when you get tired of giving, ladies and gentlemen, just keep giving, because God has your ram in the bush. Miles Monroe said, I love listening to him. He said that the value of life is not in its duration. It's not about how long we live, but the value of life is in its donation. It's about how much we have to give while we're here on earth. And I want to add that President Kennedy, he died at a young age, but he made history. Martin Luther King, he died at a young age, but he too made history. But there was a man in the Bible called Methuselah. And Methuselah, according to the Bible, he lived 969 years. And ladies and gentlemen, the only thing that the Bible said about Methuselah is he died. So my message to you is, let me be your ram in the bush. I am Dr. Rogers, visibility strategist. I am a business coach. And if you want to go from where you are to where you would desire to be so that you too can use your gifts and talents, reach out to me. And guess what? My information will be in the chat. Thank you very much for listening. That concludes our event for the day. I'm going to turn this program back over to Pastor Dorothy Ross, the host and organizer. And let's give her some energy as she comes forward. Come on.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I want to thank Sharon Font and Hillary Gooden and Shirley. They're some of my great supporters. I just want to thank you for being here. Doss, thank you and your team for coming. My team as well, Camille, Rob, and Nemra, thanks for coming. And if you have anything going on, any events coming up, any workshops coming up,